The Lynx has been a damn near perfect do-it-all electric unicycle for me, and it's my car replacer. However, I've owned it long enough now that I've revealed some shortcomings and issues which I'll be covering in this video. However, overall, it really has lived up to my hype, which was pretty high expectations. Alright guys, let's get stuck into it. Just feels like tons of power. I'm really excited to be testing this against the Sherman S. It's awesome to ride seated. Charts on the website aren't that accurate, so that's why I developed my own charts with testing. Mark that section there, cut it off with a jigsaw. Now what about the waterproofing? This is a big one. Raw power of the Lynx. Well, I can't overpower this wheel. It snapped off into my hands, so it's been sheared off. Found this crack on my right pedal, high speed crash I had, and I'm overall very happy with the build quality. This is what we want. Let's do a cost breakdown.
Australians on average will spend more than $3,200 on fuel.
Welcome everyone, I'm Jono and this is my main review of the Lynx, but I've covered several other topics, so check out my playlist for the full episodes. And also it's a very lengthy video, so check out the chapters if you want to skip ahead. Otherwise, grab a drink and get comfy. Let's start with why I chose the Lynx. So it's just a flagship model from Leaperkim and I've been really impressed with their build quality coming from the Sherman S. However, for my body weight, I found it a bit unwieldy being on the Sherman S. So the weight savings coming down to 40 kilograms was a big deal. And when you jump on the wheel, you really do feel that. Plus going from 100 to 150 volts now, huge jump up. And the other stats while we're at it are 90 millimeters of suspension travel with damping on compression and rebound. And it's a progressive spring, meaning it's softer and then it stiffens up at the end. And that works really well, get into that later. Decent spiked pedals, front jump pads, but it's a bit bare bone on the other accessories. However, you don't need too much to get up and going, but you do need to save a bit of cash for some accessories. Let's start in the first chapter, which is riding feel. So stepping up onto the EUC, it's a pretty high step at about 9.8 inches. Not an issue coming from the Sherman S for me, but I've seen that a few people have been having issues with the height and that's creating a bit of instability on the wheel, particularly at higher speeds. I've been noticing I've been having to do a bit more pressure awareness on my pedals as I'm riding, but with the front power pads I can lock into those as well. Hasn't been an issue. However, there is the accessory of the lowered pedals.
Hey John, it kind of numbs the wheel more, like to your inputs, which is nice for stability, and then also just that it actually makes the seat higher.
I've heard it gives really good results. However, they're quite expensive shipped to Australia, and if you want to ride off-road, then you don't really want to be lowering your pedal height at all. Plus, if you have a V-shaped tyre and you're getting deep lean angles, you might be clipping those during the turns a bit more. And now what about the tyre? So it came with the Kenda K262 off-road tyre, and I started to really love this one. It has a very specific feel to it, which is at lower PSIs, it's got to be around 24 to round it out. If you're too high, it makes it a knife's edge and you tip off the side. So I run 24 PSI, rounds it out a bit. So it's pretty stable at lower speeds, but then if you go on a bit harder, it'll whip over. And that means it can be quite startling. And I do like the deeper knobs because it takes out some of the lower bumps. And it's been a great adventure tyre. I've had a few issues with it. So we've had a few weeks of rain here, so I've been out riding on the road in the rain, and it's not soft enough for those conditions, and that was my first big crash. All right, just went down pretty fast. Kenda tyre on the wet road did it. We slid about 8 meters and I'll check in on the wheel. Let's have a look. Pretty good scratch on the underside of the foot plate there. Surprisingly good on the top of the wheel. Yeah, not bad. Was already going slower for the wet conditions and I slid out. It didn't squeal or anything, it was just and I went down pretty hard, and I guess the bitumen was a bit polished as well. I had this gear on, so it held up really well. Nothing really fell off the wheel. The other issue with the Kenda tyre is if you're pushing hard, during the turns it really leans over. On the track day, I was flying through a turn, maybe around 60, 70 kilometers an hour. And we also had a tailwind, so it was bad conditions. Let's pace out the skid marks. So starting from here, 22 meter slide on my gear, so that's why we gear up. The wheel leaned over a ton, and I was in a bit of a scared stance. You can't be scared on EUCs, it's just bad news. So I wasn't locked into the pads, got violent wobbles, threw me off really quick. I reckon street tyre would have been a lot better in that situation. So the Kenda tyre, really do like it. However, it's causing me a few issues riding harder and in the rain. So that's why I've changed to the Michelin Pilot Street 2, and I'll get to that later on since I've only just changed. Alrighty, so this is a bigger wheel, about 40 kilograms, so slower riding is a bit less comfortable. However, it can do it pretty well, well balanced, and that's in comparison to the Sherman S in particular. So you can go your walking speeds, and particularly if you're running that 24 PSI on the Kenda tyre, you can really direct the wheel nimbly. And so when we come to the suspension, it's been awesome. It's got a good feel to it. However, I went with a 66-pound spring, and that is too heavy a weight for me. So in my setup guide, I'll go into more details, but the suspension has rebound damping and compression damping, as well as preload adjustment. So those are all the factors you can play with. Next up is seated riding. Now, there's a big EUC with the mass and the 20-inch wheel. It's awesome to ride seated. However, it doesn't come with any seat. So I shopped around a fair bit, and that's when I decided to build my own. So let's go over some of the options available. There's the Bido option from the shops. That was about 150 Australian dollars, and it didn't look tall enough for me, and I didn't really like the front handle connection because I use that often to brake with and to lift the wheel. So I wanted to keep the front handle clear. And now I was going to buy the Luna seat for the Suron. However, I spoke to my buddy John Wall, and he had already purchased it and didn't rate it at all, said it wasn't very comfortable. So I was interested in the EUC Crazy leather seat, and that looks really top quality craftsmanship. So that's where my seat comes in. It's currently about 150 bucks plus shipping. So I did a whole video there if you're interested, and I also have a purchase link in the description if you would like one. So due to the better responsiveness of the lighter wheel compared to the Sherman S, you can brake while seated a fair bit better, which is really nice. Now, starting to talk about some of the accessories. Doesn't come with any power pads besides the front jump pad, which is a hard plastic, vertically adjustable, and it is a bit narrow for some people. You can get an aftermarket wider adapter. I would recommend at least the rear braking pads for safety. You could probably get away with no front pads because it's so responsive, but to get the biggest performance out of this, you do need to have the front power pads as well. Now, these are the same ones from my Nylonove Kinetic V2 review video, and I've still been using them since last year, really enjoying them. They've been held up, so I'm not sponsored anymore by them, but just been impressed with it. And if you'd like to get a pair, use my coupon code Jono for a discount. No kickbacks, just a discount for you guys. So one of my gripes is with the front handle. It is fairly wide, so Sometimes when my knee is forward, it will rub and create a pressure point on my knee against the front of the handle. It's somewhat uncomfortable. Yeah, it's a bit off-putting when you're doing hard acceleration lean. And so we've improved with the pedal hardness here. We used to have soft, medium, hard, but now we have a slider from 0 to 100% hardness. And I was running 42% for a while. However, as you start to ride harder, it just has too much delay when you braking hard into corners, and that might have been part of the issue on track day. If you're a bit softer, then it's more relaxing and gentle for your casual riding, and also better suited for seated riding. The Lynx does have an issue. The longer I hold an acceleration or a lean, it starts to tilt more in that direction. So let's talk about a bit of the comfort of the wheel in terms of the weight. Well, the distribution of the weight is really impressive, and plus the 5 kilograms of savings goes a long way. They've done a great job saving that weight, and I think it's the front and back weight distribution that really makes it more nimble, because it's more centered, and you feel that in every aspect of the wheel, from lifting it to cornering, braking, acceleration, mounting, taking off. It's a big deal. What about rain riding? Well, I've had a lot of confidence in the rain due to the build quality, and I've also modified the foot plates with my studs for extra traction, which also greatly improves my confidence. However, after the crash with the Kenda tyre from the slide out in the wet, I've really lost confidence in that tyre, and I can't really enjoy rain riding at the moment. I just have zero faith in the traction, so that's a big reason I've gone to the street tyre, particularly while we're having such a rainy season here in Australia. Alright, so coming to night riding, and the front headlight is really bright. It's quite a cold white colour, and it's a cone shape, so awesome if you're alone out in the woods or somewhere, but in suburbia with pedestrians, cars, it's pretty awful. Very blinding, so your options are to dip it down a lot, or you can buy an aftermarket shade, that might help a little bit. Or what I often do is dip it down, and then if I'm riding seated, I'll just put my hands over the front of the light. The rear light is pretty decent. It's lights up brighter as you're braking, but they still have the indicators as you're leaning, which is pretty rubbish feature, and I think it's time we do away with that for good. I still need to use a headlight. You really need one to look through corners and to see objects at head height. It's just really recommended. So comparing that to the Sherman S, it's slightly brighter and also a lot brighter than the Inmotion V11, which used to have the standard rating for the headlight. And that one also features the cutoff beam, which was quite well received, particularly by oncoming traffic. For aftermarket options, we do have the Cyclops light, and that seems to be pretty good. Then you're going to be fiddling with your different low beams, high beams. It does feature the cutoff, which is very good. You don't want to be blinding oncoming traffic, but I don't want to be putting more money into accessories at this point. All right, so what about the Acceleration Feel? Well, it's very responsive. It just goes, and it will keep going way up to top speed. So you actually have to be careful, because you'll get yourself into trouble really quickly. So if you're a new rider, take it easy, because it does take extra skill to ride at higher speeds, because the wobbles come on faster and a lot harder. So just take it easy. I've come to a private road for the acceleration and braking test. really excited to be testing this against the Sherman S because I always thought the Lynx felt faster. So talking about the motor power, 3,200 watts nominal, 8,000 peak. It just feels like tons of power. It's almost a, limitless well. So much confidence, and it actually goes so quick that I actually have to pull back and ride within my own abilities. So plenty of room to grow. And surprisingly, it has mellowed me out a bit as a rider. So let me explain. It does get a bit more jittery at higher speeds versus the Sherman S, which is more of the cruiser class. And that's because it just has that lighter weight, doesn't cut through the air as easily, and isn't as planted and rock solid. Not quite as responsive as the Patton. So I've had a great time going off-road on this wheel, so let's cut to that.
You reckon you'll be able to get up that? Come on, come on, you got this? Oh, so close. Nice.
What about off-road riding? Well, the Lynx kicks ass. The lighter weight, nimbleness really comes into effect with that good progressive suspension. Now I've been going through some fairly chunk here. It's quite loose and muddy, and you should be able to see from the slow-mo replays that the Kenda K262 is eating up this terrain really well. Only in deep mud and up hills was I having some problems. I have my studded foot plates upgrade installed, so a lot of confidence in the foot plate traction. Oh, a bit slippy there. I'd be a bit sketched out doing this with these stock foot plates. So it depends on your boot traction, got to keep that in mind. A bit loose through there, definitely wouldn't be able to do this on the street tyre. And the mudguards have let me down. You can see there's a lot of mud around the front of the EUC, and particularly where those holes will be if you remove the jump pads. So a bit of an issue there, and at the back, flicking up and even reaching my seat. Speaking of seat, I've got the extra tall super soft here, and I can ride seated through this chunk very comfortably. It just goes to show the suspension working in combination with the soft seat. Really good stuff. Oh, here comes a bit of a water section. Holy shit. All right, so I just got drenched then. And just goes to show the mudguard doesn't quite cut it. And this is why you really want to have a good IP rating or stock waterproofing, and definitely go over it yourself. I'll check in a bit later with the teardown to see how the wheel's holding up after this abuse. So what about complaints? Well, at the slower speeds it does feel heavy. You're not going to get away from that. Something like a Patton or a lighter wheel is going to be better for your technical slow trails. Oh shit. Oh. Just no getting around that fact, but it goes just fine on the majority of cases. Alrighty, I'm going to hand it back to the main review. See ya. Alrighty, so we're working with a 2700 watt hour battery here. Now, originally in my other videos I said don't worry about it because we have 50% faster charging over a 100 volt wheel because we're pumping in 5 amps at the 150 volts, 750 watts power charging. that gives you about a 4-hour charge window, and like most electric vehicles, it charges quickly at the start and then tapers off towards the end of the charge cycle, around 80% as it starts to balance. Here it is, full tilt back at 0% battery, so it just kept getting slower and slower at 1%. Progressively tilts you back, the wheel lets you know you need to slow down with the lower battery percentage. Now your expected drain rate is great performance down to about 30% battery, and then your top speed is going to start getting impacted. It automatically starts tilting you back at the higher speeds. However, good performance all the way to about 10% battery, hitting the higher speeds, and then it really just fades quickly down to 3%, and then you basically run out of juice at that point. Oh, it's really resisting me here. I'm gonna have to step off. Oh. All right, so I'm gonna need low battery mode to get up this hill. However, it does have the excellent feature once again from the Sherman S, low battery mode. So if you're in a real pinch, you can enable it through the screen, and that means it takes away some of those safety thresholds. You can now drain your battery below recommended level, removes the warning beeps. It's really useful because I had to take it into the shops, and at around 12% battery it starts to periodically low warning beep you. So it removes that, and you can take it through these shops, and that will mean you aren't disturbing everyone and embarrassing yourself. It also removes the tilt back, so you know, ride with restraint, don't push it too hard even though the wheel isn't warning you with the tilt back. Like the other Sherman, it does have battery rebound, meaning when it's under load you drop down, when you stop it'll pop up again. I've heard other wheels don't do this, so that might be something that's unexpected for you. Alrighty, let's talk about range. Well, it was a bit of a shock coming from the Sherman S, which had way more range than I need. This is a bit more on the limit, causes me some range anxiety, and then I have to make sure that it's fully charged more often. So if you're really pushing it, you can expect around 65 kilometers of range, and that means hard accelerations, ripping it on the straights. However, that's still mixed riding. If you're just going to be flooring it on a straight line, then this is definitely not the wheel for you. You want a cruiser class, at least 3600 watt hours battery. But if you take it more conservative, say 30 to 40 kilometer speeds, not full on leaning acceleration, you can get over 100 kilometers of range. So to wrap up the overall riding characteristics of the Lynx, it likes to stride its legs and it goes fast quickly. So if you're in tight suburban cities or something, you might be a bit too restricted, but if you can let it open up on some roads and back areas, you're going to hit some jumps, that might be well suited for you. And speaking of jumps, that's opened a whole new world for me. The suspension has that pop to it. It really gives you confidence to just bonk off things, and I've really been enjoying that a lot. Went out with Stephen to a mountain bike park, and we were sending it on some jumps, and it just gives you a lot of confidence, and it'll allow you to grow a lot in skill with this wheel. All right guys, time to move to a new location. All right, so on the ride over here, I just had some extra thoughts about the Kenda tyre, and it's really important, the tyre choice, because it impacts the ride feel incredibly much. Alrighty, let's jump into the wheel review. But first, let's do the setup guide. I'm going to hand it over to the voiceover to be very accurate and precise with that.
Well now, let's just see if there's anything missing.
All right, welcome to the Lynx setup section. The most important thing before you even buy the wheel is choosing the right spring weight. And I found the charts on the website aren't that accurate, so that's why I developed my own charts with testing. So the sag is the important factor here, and that's how much it compresses under your riding weight. So I did it with my gear and an extra 15 or 30 kilos with the water bottles, adjusted the preload, developed these charts. So the green area is your adjustable range, and so you look up your riding weight and see how much sag you'll expect. Now we're chasing around that 25 to 30% sag. So that's the upper range of the chart. So find if your weight will fall into that range there for the 66 pound spring. Now for the 62 pound spring, I had one data point, extrapolated my chart. So that's the values there. Same thing for the 70 pound spring. Check out Rawnee's setup guide on the forums for more info on setting up your suspension. Now, when you first get your Lynx, it'll be in transport mode. So hold the power button on until the 10 hits and the beep and release it. It'll be out of transport mode. Now the screen settings. Next most important thing is to make sure you get the update. So you'll need the Leaperkim app. So download that, connect your wheel, and then go to the firmware. Check for the update. So 5006 introduced a anti-cutout feature from electromagnetic radiation. So nextly, tire pressure. I recommend 24 PSI for the off-road and around 30, 33. Start off there with the street tire. So the Lynx comes with front jump pads and they are quite easily adjustable with this wing nut. And there is a 3D printed accessory to make it wider. However, if you have nice power pads like me, you might want to remove it. And if you do, that leaves quite a big hole in the front of the case here. So there is a 3D printed accessory for that, but I tried a silicone plug and it just wasn't really good enough. Plus, I thought the front bumpers there looks quite good. And definitely when I'm flogging the wheel a bit, it really collects dirt and water right in that area. So you do want to protect that as best you can. So yeah, 3D printed plug is an option. Or from my buddy John Wall, he suggested this option of cutting off the section you don't need, keeping the front protection of the bumper and the cover for the hole. So you just have to mark that section there, cut it off with a jigsaw, and then give it a sand to smooth it off with some sandpaper. And I found I needed a little bit more off from that bumper to fit my power pads. And then I also wanted to add a bit of silicone just to give even more protection for water and dirt ingress into that hole. Now be careful because there are different bolt lengths, so the longer bolt goes there and then all the shorter ones in these other sections. I used around 1.5 Newton meters in my torque wrench. When it comes to the power pads, you're going to need Velcro. So mine don't have the holes pre-cut. So make sure to cut those, makes teardowns in the future way easier. For lengths, you'll need 1,200 millimeters with 100 millimeter wide, 430 millimeters with 50 millimeter wide. And you really want it to stick well. So give it a good clean with some alcohol and then hit the glue with a bit of heat as well. You can see it hangs over the front a little bit. I have them overhanging even more now. I did try a screen protector. I wanted to give the buttons even more water resistance, so I brought this one up and fitted it, but it was too inflexible and didn't fit properly, catching dirt, as you can see. Does have a bit of that rattle there. Now, as many people have mentioned, the trolley handle rattles. So this tip from Matthew Tech Motor was to remove the handle and cut some pieces of foam into the top trolley handle here. It works quite well. The Lynx received a firmware update where you can now change the max charging voltage cutoff in the BMS. So the next few steps are somewhat redundant. All right, so there's already been some talk about the charger overcharging the wheel. So we can have a fix with this as eWheels emailed. So you got to remove 4 screws from the charger here and then probe pins 1 and 4. You can read out the voltage.
Come to this fence over here.
Yep. This one.
Fuck, it's electric.
You're not supposed to touch it.
Don't touch it because it's electrified. Why did you say that? I was getting into it and you...
And then we adjust this potentiometer. It's a tiny little screw, so turning it counterclockwise will lower the output voltage. So tinker with that until you get the 121.2 volts. That's what the Lynx is rated at. However, you're not done there because the Lynx also needs to be calibrated with the voltage readout. So probe your batteries once again.
Cowbung the baby.
Yep. I'm not kidding.
So I'm reading about 0.4 volts over on the screen. So you can adjust that with the voltage correction factor on the screen. So I just did that then. Alternatively, an accessory like the PID Zoom Charging Enhancer can be used, who I'm affiliated with, code Jono for 5% off. Alrighty, hopefully that was useful and I'll kick it back. Alright, hopefully that was informative. Quite a few little topics there. I think the main one is getting the first suspension choice right. Alrighty, when we come to the Lynx, the overall feeling of it is very high premium build quality, and that's what we would expect from such a high-priced flagship model from Leaperkim. Very sturdy, rugged, and when it comes to the motor noise, it's got less of the Sherman S whine, and it's got more of a hum that's fairly high-pitched, and that's fairly constant. Definitely someone pointed out first time they jumped on the Lynx. So the flimsiest part is definitely the trolley handle, and I've started using it less. I simply just trolley it around by pushing on the top of my seat since they're fairly tall. The trolley works pretty well. I've taken it into shops and it can get away from you because it's positioned at the rear. So if you let it turn into a corner, it can swing around. So a bit dodgy there. Just been using the seat to push it around so far. So what about the motor characteristics as you're riding? It's extremely smooth and mostly quiet except for that hum I already mentioned, except I haven't really seen anyone talking about this. It gets a bit of a what feels like a harmonic resonance as I get up to their 55 kilometer, 60 kilometer range. Bit of a vibration, and I thought maybe it's my wheel or that spacer issue that was in batch 1 on the motor axle. But I tried another Lynx, different tire and 50E cells, video up here, and it had the same thing happen. So I think it's just some sort of, maybe it's a firmware thing. Yeah, it feels like a harmonic, just a bit of a vibration. Hard to describe. It's very, very slight stutter. So that's pretty disappointing. Like if it didn't have that, it would be an amazingly smooth acceleration and feeling motor throughout the full speed range. But that's a bit of a knock on the performance there. Now, when you're rocking back and forth, the Sherman S had a bit of a clicky magnet, so you could feel it ticking over from magnet to magnet. This is even smoother than that, so good job there. Talking about the seat convenience, it's a little bit of a problem as it covers the trolley handle, but most of them are designed to pivot up in one way or another, or I just push it by the seat. And some of them cover the display completely, which is a no-go for me since I don't want to have to be lifting it up every time to turn it on and off, change the headlight, look at my battery remaining. So designed that right out of the Jono seat. So when we're talking about the stand, incredibly sturdy, awesome construction, even better than the Sherman S. I love that you don't have to think about it. It's always just ready to go. Unlike the Inmotion V11, which could get left down and caught in your tires, cause a cutout, no problems. Now, there's been some concerns about the clearance. I've been doing stairs and small quarter pipe drops at the skate park, no issue. However, if you're doing bigger drops, I don't know, maybe like 6 foot quarter pipes, you'll probably want to take it off. Plus, if you're sending it on bigger jumps. So that's more of your niche case. I'd say for the majority of riders, not an issue. Tyre reverse spun up and flicked mud all over me, so one strike again on the Mudguard. I think it's covered the front pretty nicely. So when we want to lock up the wheel, I really love the 20-inch form factor because it gives you that room through the rim and the hub there to put this folding lock, and that's my go-to. If you're using a 16-inch wheel, that's a solid area and you can't lock it up through the hub in the same manner. So very easy to secure in that way. Of course, no lock is fully secure, and depending on where you live, you might not want to leave it unattended. Now the Lynx, like the Sherman S, doesn't come with a kill switch, so you can either tip it over to cut out the motor via the lean angle, or just turn it off is probably a best bet as well. So when we're talking about the weight, we got that 40 kilograms, and that translates to being much easier to portable, chuck it in the back of the car, lifting it over trees if you're on the track, or just even popping it up here for a photo opportunity. Really good. So the key dimensions of the Lynx are 250 millimeters to the top of the foot plates, about 440 millimeters foot plates to the top cover. And then if we're going from the ground to the top of the EUC without the seat, 690 millimeters. So talking about the suspension characteristics, I think I screwed up my choice of the 66-pound spring. So check out the charts that I've done up with my own tests. I've just gone 0 damping on the compression. I want it to be nice and plush, and that's partly to accommodate the stiffer spring. And I have noticed when I'm wearing more gear and loaded up in the backpack that the suspension has a nicer response. And I'm getting a bit more of that sag statically, and that's what I'd want. When it comes to the rebound damping, I've only gone +3 just to eliminate some of that pogo effect. However, it does spring you up, and I do want that playfulness because I want to be bonking off little jumps and things like that. Just be a bit safer with more damping, but that's the compromise I'm making. The Lynx is so light and accelerates so easily that I just find myself riding seated so much more often, because on the Sherman Air, so that was a big reason why I would ride seated so often, is that it was just tiring for me. So yeah, I'm riding a lot more standing up, and I don't need the front power pads as much. Just if I scooch my feet forward on the foot plates a bit, then I'm able to just push as much acceleration as I often need. And then if I really want to flog it, then that's when I'm into the front acceleration power pads, and I was able to see the smart BMS. And that's really handy because you can see all of the individual cell voltages for the balancing. Now, EUC World is my go-to Android aftermarket app, and really handy, but it doesn't seem to be calibrated properly for the safety margin. And it did cut out one time at about 33% battery. I couldn't reconnect EUC World until I restarted the wheel, so I actually don't use it anymore because it's got so much overhead and performance that I don't feel like I need warning alarms from EUC World. I know the limits, and it just can give way more than I can demand out of it. And speaking of performance, I got the 50S cells. If you're getting at such a race high-speed wheel, then I want that extra performance. And also, if you're going to have 4 parallel packs, that was a bit more of a reason I wanted the overhead. I go into a full video of the cell types here. Alrighty, that last area was getting a bit busy and loud, so moving on to another location. And it's a beauty, so love being out on a sunny day like this. So the next section was about the safety features. It's my belief that EUCs are one of the safest PEVs, and I'd like to make a future video about that. But I always get a chuckle when people say, oh, you're endangering others, when the most dangerous mode of transport has been normalised by society.
A driver has ploughed head-on into a Gold Coast bus.
Dramatic scene, and the third call for a car smashed.
5 people have been confirmed dead after a car crashed into a beer garden.
So often that in many cases it doesn't even make the news. And this one, and this one, and this one, and this one, and this one.
Crashes kill 1.3 million people per year, or about 3,500 people a day.
Emotional death.
Just trying to imagine what the global response would be if 10 to 20 passenger planes crashed every day, killing everyone on board.
And this one, and this one, and this one, and this one, and this one.
Cars can be useful for certain things, but the way we've become dependent on them and designed everything around them, well, I'm not going to sugarcoat this, it's literally killing us.
Yes, you shouldn't be speeding on the footpaths, and take all due care for others, but due to the slower speeds and the overall lighter weight of EUCs, they're just inherently safer for others around you. And I was saying the large 20-inch wheel is just inherently safer, rolls over bumps and that sort of thing easier than your smaller wheels. And then we also have the suspension, which is very capable and will often save you for any unexpected bumps and potholes. It also has the speed alarms, which comes through on this front speaker, very loud and audible. So that one will let you know if you hit those alarms, and you could set that in the screen, which I'll go over in a minute. And then we also have the Tiltback, but I really dislike this feature because it doesn't come on sharp enough to have an impact really, and it's just slowly rocks up and it's very awkward. So I don't like that, turned it off myself. However, as your battery runs lower, that Tiltback automatically engages at the safety speeds. So the Lynx also has the over torque feature, so if the wheel binds up from say a stick or a rock getting jammed up, mud in the mudguard, then it'll cut the power and prevent a burnout on the main board. So that's a good feature to save your wheel. And we also have the hall sensor algorithm. If the hall sensor fails, won't drop you. It's able to use the computer to calculate the balance until you come to a safe stop. And then it just comes to the raw power of the Lynx. It has so much power overhead that you're not really, well, I can't overpower this wheel. It's got way more capacity than I need, and also speed. So as I was saying, I'm having to scale back my riding to be within my own skill limits and on the road conditions for the Lynx. Really awesome stuff. And it's actually made me a bit more of a cautious rider, because otherwise I'm just going to full send it and it won't end well. So the charge ports, having moved from the front on the Sherman S, now on the Lynx it's at the rear, and it's really tucked in there. A little bit hard to access, so I tilt the wheel up, plug it in, and then I can tilt it back onto the stand. Because it's a bit more obscured, I do forget to shut the charge port occasionally, but it's so well protected up in there that even on this trail ride I had, no mud or debris went up into there, but it does have a well-fitting rubber cover that goes over the top of those charge ports. Very confidence-inspiring. When it comes to the charger, it does have a fan that's on all the time while charging. It's very loud. Might be an issue if you're in a confined space. It runs a red light until it starts to balance, and then it'll power on and off between the red and green light while balancing. Green light, when fully charged and balanced, takes about 4 hours, as I said before. Now the dimensions of the charger are 210 by 100 by 64 millimeters. So I have fit it in a backpack pretty easily, but I did have it break on me recently. And I also saw Marty Back's charger broke, but luckily that was a warranty job. So that's why it's so important, guys, to support your local EUC distributor, because I got that repaired really quickly under warranty. Now the voltage from the stock charger is a little bit too high, as I showed in the setup guide, so just refer back to that. So there's a couple of aftermarket fast chargers available, but the stock charger is very fast already. It could be handy to have a spare charger, as mine failed. So when it comes to the quality of life of living with the Lynx, very little maintenance. You can pretty much just get on and ride every single time. All you have to do is maybe once a week, fortnight I mean, check that the air pressure is good in your tire. But because it's a oil spring suspension, not air, you don't have to be fiddling with your air pressures all the time. Just really nice and fun, just jumping on the wheel, good to go. So what about your warranty? This is a Leaperkim, so it does come with the 2-year warranty, and they've recently increased the cover for certain parts. So good on you, Leaperkim. That's what we need to grow EUC community. Now, once again, like the Sherman S, we got the tough rim. Seems like the OG Sherman soft rims have been left in the past. When we come to the motor and axle, it's a solid through axle. These were copping flack back in the day for bending, but it's really thick, shouldn't be an issue. With the hollow bore, bit more tidy with the cable routing for the motor, and then you have a larger bearing, so that allows more ingress opportunity to destroy your bearings, and they cost more, so they're pros and cons to all of that. Now, what about the waterproofing? This is a big one because you want to be able to ride in all conditions through puddles, off-road, and I believed from everything I'd seen that it was good enough stock to ride in the rain, and that's what I've been doing this whole time. Didn't even use a rain cover over the top, but we don't know how well it's held up until we do the tear down, so let's get stuck into that. Welcome everyone to the 2,400 kilometre teardown of the Lynx. Now this is important to check all the waterproofing and the wear and tear. I'm also taking the opportunity to install a lighter 2.5 weight suspension oil to see if that gives me more play in the rebound and compression damping on the suspension. And I'm also taking this chance to install the Michelin Pilot Street 2 if that helps with some of the issues I mentioned with the Kenda K262. Alright, let's get stuck into it.
Holy Jesus. What is that? What the fuck is that? What is that, Private Pilot?
Alrighty, so this isn't a full teardown video because that'll take too long. There's plenty of good videos for that. So I'll just go over the major issues that I found, and the first one was a motor bolt. It felt loose and I thought that was very strange, and then the head just snapped off into my hand, so it's been sheared off. I'm not sure if that was from factory or from my usage. I did try to screw extract it, but that failed, so I'm just running 3 bolts on that side at the moment. The Kenda tyre was fairly easy to remove using this technique. I then put on the Michelin using the zip tie technique. That was much the same, but just trying something new. While I was waiting to see if I'd had a pinch puncture, I got to work on the suspension oil change. So I've already got a video and it's very similar to that, so check that out. But essentially it's the same process. Removing the old oil, it was quite clean. Definitely could have gone a lot longer without the oil change. While I was at it, I cleaned the dust seals and they were in good condition. But note, once again, like the Sherman S, there were some strut holes open on the Mudguard support. The major one was sealed up, so good job Leaperkim. However, the wire openings were still open, so I closed those just to give a bit more protection to the lower stanchions. So I got to cleaning up the wheel for reassembly. This is an important step because when you're going over it, cleaning, you notice things that might be wrong with the wheel or loose bolts, and glad I did because I found this crack on my right pedal. You might be thinking it's from my pedal mod. However, there aren't any of my bolt holes near this one, so it could be from that high-speed crash I had. The pedals took hell of a beating, as you can see from the scratch marks. Not sure if that will be a warranty job because it is a wearing item potentially. Just a quick update for my footplate video. So this is my most up-to-date stud layout and it excludes that weak spot. Also, a pro tip from Mr. Malaman is that you don't have to tap the threads. If you use a 4.5mm drill bit, you can simply screw in the studs. Saves a lot of time. And I followed Ryan Mack's advice, and that was to sharpen off the top of the existing studs to give them a bit more grip. I also noted that the front speaker, like the Sherman S, is quite exposed to the elements. However, I've been riding in lots of rain without the cover. It's been fine, hasn't failed on me yet. So as you're reassembling the wheel, make sure to use thread locker on all the bolts. I'm going to chuck up a quick talk guide here of what I use. This is from my experience with the Sherman S, talking to my buddy John Wall and using this chart as a reference. It's not a perfect science. If you have a bit of grease on there, or even if you use the thread locker, it changes the friction coefficient, but it's very handy to have a torque wrench and I'd highly recommend it. Later on, I had the replacement top cover shipped to me, free of charge, warranty job, good on your Leaperkim, and that's to fix the button issue that was sticking, so that just requires the top cover to be removed. While I was at it, I was going to inspect how well it's sealed against dust and water ingress, and the electronics looks really good condition, and also noted that the rear charge ports are sealed in there with silicone, great condition, so the electronics from the old needs to be unscrewed and put onto the new cover. So there's very little visual difference between them, slight change in the rubber mold. Reinstall the screen. You can't use Loctite on its plastic components, so I use silicone here as per the factory. Secure the screen cable with a dab of silicone. When it comes to the lighter 2.5 weight suspension oil, I think it was a mistake. The 5 weight would be a better bet. It did in fact remap the entire damping range, so I was using around 3 to 6 before. Now I'm maxed out to get a similar effect, but it's still a bit too spongy and the feel is just a bit too soft overall for me. What I was really after was more of the linear feel of the suspension like the Sherman S, but I've gotten used to the progressive as is better for jumping anyway. And I'm overall very happy with the build quality. This is what we want with a high performance top flagship model like the Lynx, and it's what you're paying for. Very easy to work on. I'm very excited to test out the new suspension oil and the new tyre, so let's get stuck into that. Alright, so that street tyre only lasted about 200 kilometers before I took it off. Just didn't like it too much. I found its speeds on the Lynx, it just got too much speed wobbles for me. I really would recommend getting the pedal lowering kit if you're using that street tyre. Give it a lot more stability. And now I've changed to the Shinko 241, not the Kenda, and I'm going to be putting that in another video. There's just too much to talk about. So if you want to see that, make sure to subscribe. So very happy after the teardown to see that it's even easier to work on than the Sherman S. So well done to Leaperkim for making it easier. However, there was a few disappointing points there. Now, when we come to the costs, it is a very expensive EUC, $6,100 here in Australia. So let's do a cost breakdown of the running of it. And this is my car replacer. So that means I'm automatically saving so much on registration, insurance, constant fuel costs. There is the electricity, but hell of a lot cheaper than fuel, let me tell you. Yes, cars are generally faster and more comfortable. However, I've come to realise that cars are bullshit.
Beating the Bowser is getting harder to do. Australians on average will spend more than $3,200 on fuel.
Jesus Christ. Always having to do things that you don't want to do.
Well, I'm fine. It's just that life is pointless and nothing matters. None of my old hobbies interest me.
And now you're going to a job that you don't really want to work at. You drive through traffic.
Here's Europe and all of their rail connections, and here's the United States and all of our rail connections. It's a joke.
Car dependency is so entrenched in the US. Having a car itself is non-negotiable. They were the only option. US spends something like $11,000 a year on transportation, and that's almost all car. Motorists always think that they are paying for other people's public transport, and it's the opposite.
I thought you do this. Oh, what am I supposed to do?
Australia is also very car dependent. I would rather spend a bit longer riding to my destination than that same time slaving away at a job that I hated, earning the money to drive a car. And then you've got to set aside quite a bit for gear. I've splashed out and gotten a bit more expensive stuff because I want it to be nice enough that I'll be using it. So let's get to some testimonials. Buddy John Wall, he had the Patton and the Sherman S. So he's replaced both of those units with the Lynx. And as far as he said, very enjoyable. But he did have a transition period of not being so sure about it. It's got it dialed in and has been really enjoying it. Now, to play devil's advocate, Rick, who I had the ride with, he's had the S22, bought the Lynx.
No, the Lynx is just too fast. I want to go the Lynx.
Yeah.
That's gonna kill me, that thing. I'm still pretty happy with my adventure.
And was a bit scared of it. He said it had too much speed and he'd get carried away and hurt himself. So he sold it and picked up the V14, which as far as I know, he's been enjoying. So it might be too much wheel for a lot of people, just consider that. So when we come to community questions, I've been seeing a theme in the comments section about the Lynx versus the Patton or the Sherman S. Well, check out my Sherman S comparison video here. But when we compare it in the lineup, it's a really good hybrid between those two, the Patton and the Sherman S. So it's not jumbled up in a category. It's got its own space there, and they've done a great job. I would say use the Patton if you want something even more nimble for whipping around a bit slower speeds. Say you want to be cruising no more than 50 kilometers an hour because the 16-inch wheel doesn't have the stability and the speed of the 20-inch tyre. And the Patton still has the performance, get up and go over the Lynx. So if you really want maximum torque and braking, I would still go the Patton. You do miss out on the progressive suspension, but you can still have plenty of fun on the Patton. Now I'd go the Sherman S if you want just a real good, stable, high-speed cruiser with the huge battery. Those are the main calling cards of the Sherman S. Now what about other wheels? All right, so admittedly I'm a Leaperkim fanboy and biased towards them, and that's why I keep buying them time and time again. Just that build quality and 2-year warranty pulls me in, and I don't have much desire really to have any other wheel at this point. I might like a very small wheel, say a King Song S 1619, just to do short trips down to the beach or shopping. I use my e-scooter for that. Really important to have a backup PEV, because if you have any sort of breakdown, you're shit out of luck. And yeah, they are less reliable than a car, so you have to keep that in mind. You know, the wheel didn't break on me, but the charger did, and that left me out of transportation for still 5 days, and that's when I used my e-scooter. Alrighty, so overall I'm super stoked on the Lynx. You have to make a couple changes if you want to get the best performance out of it. I would have got this instead of the Sherman S originally back in 2022 if it was available. However, very happy with my upgrade and hope this video has helped you out. Cheers everyone, ride safe, and I'll catch you next time.